Political talk on another PolitiPod Live. Tonight we'll cover Oh Shoot, Ohio edition, Governor's Race, Keeve My Name Out of Your Mouth, and Trump Dump Bigly Loser. We'll also have our segments on the media and Geo Quiz. I'm Tom Bickle.
I'm Hannah Soldner.
I'm Matt Nisanoff. We'll start with Oh Shoot, Ohio. Recently, there was a festival up in Toledo. If you know Ohio, you know Toledo's in the upper left-hand corner, if you'd like to say it that way, just at the base of the tip of Lake Erie. And they held a festival out there. Everybody was out to have a good time. And some folks decided that there was some sort of problem with each other. And there was a shooting. In fact, there were 12 people or more who were injured. And apparently several of them were engaged in some sort of a conflict, and several of others were simply standard-bys who were hit. They're looking for a 20-year-old fella by the name of Ka-Nay Taylor, and they have a photo of a second person that they're calling a second shooter, but they don't have a name yet. So they're asking folks to help. They're circulating the photo around, and they're asking folks to see if they can identify this second person. And that's the latest on Ohio. What do you think, guys? Anything on Ohio or on shootings?
I'm generally against them.
That's good.
I feel like it is. Hannah?
I am also against them. I've seen now that if you look up Ohio shooting, there's been a more recent story even than that about a potential shooting that was foiled by a different person. And it's just like, it's such a commentary that to look up something that should be very specific, like Ohio shooting, recent Ohio shooting, there's some ambiguity about which recent Ohio shooting that means.
Yes, you'll have to be more specific, as so often the case.
Yes, it's really bleak.
Can you actually give us a couple of details on that one that you looked up? Is that somebody spoiled it, or what happened there?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it again. Man convicted in plot to shoot up Ohio State sorority now lives 2 blocks from campus. So I guess this was a little while ago. But
Recent enough, I'll tell you. If you're on the other end of the
yeah,
if you're on the other end of the gun, that's recent enough. It doesn't have to be within a certain time period.
yeah. So now he lives not far from the place where he threatened to shoot up places. Lovely.
I believe that is a statistical thing as well, that there's a certain area around a person's home where it's the most dangerous, and that you're more likely to be shot by somebody from your own family than by a stranger or some sort of criminal running around trying to shoot people.
I
Um,
wonder. Oh, sorry.
no, I mean, it makes sense. And crimes of passion and that kind of thing.
You always
Please.
hear those, like, you're never more than like 8 feet away from a spider. I wonder how close we all are to some foiled mass shooter plot, or foiled, or done mass shooter plot.
I'm sure there's an app for that.
Probably. It's probably
Got
too
it.
bleak to think about.
You can't afford it, but
Um, very well. So we will move on from Ohio and on to our first segment, which would be on the media. And of course, I think the biggest story in in the past week or so has been Scott Pelley, who was part of 60 Minutes, a correspondent on 60 Minutes, and had a falling out with the new, I don't know, what do they call her? Director, minister? I don't know.
executive producer, maybe? I'm not sure.
I
Right.
don't know. She's somebody in charge of all news, but an executive producer is usually just for one show.
Right.
I told you I didn't know.
There you go. Let's look it up. She is
you
the
go.
editor-in-chief of CBS News.
Editor-in-chief. There you go. She came up with a lame nonsense after firing him, saying that he had been rude, so they had to fire him because he was rude. That's really, that's really what's important.
Wow. Somebody
The,
was rude in show business?
I
I don't
know.
believe it.
yeah, or even real life. I mean,
Right.
the perspective of who is, anyway, it's such a nonsense sort of thing to say.
Right.
But
She's taking a
apparently,
sledgehammer to the vaunted team at CBS 60 Minutes. She's hitting it with an ice pick in the back of the head, and he's rude. That's fine.
Right.
yeah, right. So what we had is that um, he was fired. She was responsible for, as I said, basically no good reason. And since then, he has come out and um, has given specific examples of things that she was requiring or saying were required, that the reporters were told they had to present a certain perspective and to say things in a certain way. So it's more like the talking points that Fox News sends out at 5 a.m., more than actual letting a reporter do their job. Uh, what do you think of Scott Pelley? What do you think about the whole issue of the press being dismantled from behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, obviously the press being dismantled is bad enough. Weiss, she's had kind of a meteoric rise. By all accounts, she's very personable. Even Scott Pelley mentioned that he liked her. Um, she is very, I guess, well liked and charismatic, but um, her whole career has basically been as a wrench thrower, and there's some value in that, but you can't really build anything that way, or maintain anything that way. And she has no experience in sort of true journalism. She has a lot of experience in commentary, on, yeah, reactions to things, but nothing on um, investigative reporting, seeking out what's really happening. And to that point, like she said, that Pelly needed to, she said, this is paraphrased by him, so it's double paraphrased by me, but something along the lines of that he needed to have, or that the 60 Minutes episode needed to have more sort of violent skirmishes amongst the protesters or something like that, and that they needed to state that Renee Good's car was driving towards the police. I mistakenly said show earlier, which would have been impossible because that's not what the footage shows. It shows specifically that she was driving away from the police. But there's sort of there's two things here. There is that she has injected her politics into this, but she has also injected sort of like an action movie sensibility, right? More violence, more aggression towards the police, more, like if it bleeds, it leads kind of stuff, and that's the honest truth is that a lot of news is not exciting, and a lot of hard hitting journalism is, somebody who did something pretty boring for a long time and went through files and, brought up old cases and read through them, and so, while some news is inherently exciting, for the most part, exciting news is not usually great news. And so if that's her skill set, it's sort of by definition, partisan politics aside, which we should not put them aside because they're really important, but by definition, her stuff is going to become less informative, useful, etc., etc., as it becomes more cinematic.
Exactly. I mean, people just sitting around spouting out their opinions on the news. Who wants to see that?
Right.
Yeah. But the point is valid. The point is that she's done this opinion thing where it's specifically for a political purpose, and to put her in charge and make her the executive producer of what was one of the leading news shows on television. I mean, 60 Minutes was at once considered at one time considered sort of the example of how you can do news investigation and it will be okay. Even if you're not making money hand over fist, you've got a very solid investigative driven reporting that gains a reputation. And from that, you get more, you get respect, you get people who will want to buy in and want to buy advertising. And there's other measures that are not taken uh, outside of direct revenue that the show itself makes that are not taken into account. And then putting some hack at the head of it because of the concerns of a particular politician is really cutting your nose off to spite your face. And the first straw in that for them is firing Scott Pelley.
Well, and to some of your points earlier, one of the other things that came up in this, if you go read the articles or the interview, is that the person who was brought in, it actually wasn't Weiss who was in the meeting with Pelley. But one of the people who was brought in was just like, we have to change things. This is like an old model and it's failing, even though like I believe 60 Minutes is doing better this year than it was doing last year. And it's not an old model. I mean, there's like maybe a 60-minute show, whatever, but they're on YouTube. They have a 24-hour feed of like news and stuff like that, so they've actually adapted well with the time and grown because of that adaptation. So I feel like it's actually sort of not too dissimilar from something we've mentioned in a couple of these shows before, of like people who are in Trump's orbit who are like, oh, it's not so hard to run the FBI, or it's not so whatever. And they get in there and it's like, well, it's actually like it's not actually like the things that you're saying aren't actually true. Like, yes, new media is changing, old media is changing and whatever, but 60 Minutes is a great example of a thing that's adapting to the modern world. Also, you made the joke about commentary. If the three of us were hired to be the editor-in-chief of CBS News, also not a great idea. At least personally. I won't speak for you all, but I should not be the editor-in-chief of CBS News.
I agree with your point, but I am available. I'm just saying. I'm just going to put that out there. If they need to replace her. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be wrong.
I'm even younger, and I'm also queer. So, hire me.
There you go. You got the edge.
Yeah, I'm like 6 months younger.
Tom, anything else about 60 Minutes before we move on?
Yeah. 60 Minutes is a successful show. And just like Colbert was a successful show. And people are coming in and kicking over sandcastles, acting like they're just doing their job. They're absolutely not. Bari Weiss got rid of producers and correspondents that have been there for years for no reason. If you look it up, 60 Minutes is a wildly successful for a news program. It's doing great. It's the most successful news program in television history, which is not overstating it. The 2025-26 season averaged an audience of 9.1 million weekly viewers, achieving a remarkable 9% year-over-year increase.
Wow.
Unlike many traditional news broadcasts that struggle to monetize, 60 Minutes has historically remained a highly profitable enterprise. Winner of awards, big cultural impact, and yet here they come and they're stripping the copper out of the wiring. For what? For what? Pennies on the dollar. To wreck it. Now, I read Scott Pelley spoke to CNN, and he said that his biggest concern was not any kind of political influence. The problem was incompetence. I don't know how he says that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I would like to hear his thinking on that, because it's obvious. I mean, I don't know, obvious to me, a layman, to be a hatchet job. They're just on the warpath for destruction and anti-woke to please the business interests who please the Trump administration. It seems on its face obvious. So for Pelley to say The bigger problem was incompetence. I mean, yeah, maybe they're just wildly incompetent, even in comparison to their stoogery. But yeah,
Well,
Kelly said, sorry, go ahead.
it certainly seems incompetent to me to fire correspondents who are doing their job. It's certainly incompetent to go in and reorganize
Of a
something that is
running machine. You're just
hugely
pulling
successful.
parts out. A
Right.
successful enterprise. It's not like they're failing and, well, we got to retool some stuff, fellas. We got to roll up our sleeves and get our, bust a few knuckles in here. No, leave it alone. Let it run. Nope, that's not. It's exactly what they're not doing, and that's bad enough to come in and just start tearing staff out, literal organs of the body that's making you money. Okay, and being exemplary while they do it. Okay, but also he says they put their thumb on the scale. They told him to dirty up the Renee Good story, make it sound like she was driving at the cop. At least introduce doubt, if not outright say that she was driving towards the cop, which she was absolutely not driving towards. To try to give, that is borderline. It's certainly malpractice, borderline evil, to give credence to the idea that that poor woman was trying to run down some poor innocent cop and he had to fire for his life. That's what they'd have you believe. To try to poison the well with that kind of nonsense and some other stuff he said I can't remember the other skullduggery they were pushing. But that's journalism done exactly backwards, ass to front. So that and the staff messing about. Yeah, I mean it's untenable and it's obviously a hit job.
Yeah, administration is definitely not investigative reporting, and
Nobody's that stupid in and stupid in this way. It's not stupid. It's malevolence.
purposeful. Absolutely, malevolence, the exact word choice. Absolutely, it's done for a political purpose, just like the whole thing with Renee Good, who was the video shows, and everybody, shows that not only does the video show it, but there's records going back for the Border Patrol guy who did it. There's records going back 10 years earlier of a guy in his position being told the entire department with the guy with him in his position
Yeah, you can't do
under
that.
the Border Patrol that people were doing that purposefully to step in front of cars to be able to say they were going to be run down so they could use their weapon.
Whoopsies.
And the reports say you got to stop doing this. And here we are 10 years later, and they've just bumped it up to the national level.
Right.
They're just doing it for for to have an excuse. So that's what that whole mess is
Looking,
about.
I
Go
just
ahead.
found I found a Hollywood Reporter thing on the most viewed television broadcast last week. Number 1 and 2, the Knicks game. Of course, it's like taking over a lot. Then the Tony Awards, obviously a special awards, and the Stanley Cup Finals, another final. Then in 5th, 60 Minutes. Like it's the apart from like sports finals or award shows, which are all special broadcasts, it's the number 1. And even amongst those, it's number 5.
Yeah. So why not pull out the lung, kidney, and spleen while it's
Right.
doing the best it has done or could possibly do? Stupid.
Well, now speaking of running away, that brings us to another on the media story. You have,
Call that
I'm
running.
sure, heard about this, where Trump was in a interview with an NBC correspondent and was being asked some tough questions. And of course, particularly because it was a woman reporter, but of course because there were difficult questions that he didn't want to admit to, he went on a little tirade and started with his rude, arrogant nonsense. But this one went to the next level where he jumped up and ran away. So
Again, you say run. That was
waddle.
there's ducks with arthritis that waddle better than that.
Well, there you
But
go.
sorry, I just had to stick up for waddlers everywhere.
Right. But it was Meet the Press. It was once again another one of those shows that has elected officials on and has since the 1950s, I believe. This is This is not somebody doing something new. This is, a renowned
Yeah.
political broadcast
Yeah.
for allowing the elected officials to have their say, but being questioned. And he just can't take any pressure. He can't take any sort of questioning. He just
It is
needs absolute obedience, or he can't possibly stand being in the same room. So he
Meet the
threw his
Press.
mic down. Go
Meet
ahead.
the Press, who through their logo and actuality is the longest running show on television.
There you
Yep.
go.
That's so, yeah, every week too.
Yeah, like it's that they're not some
Not a radical organization.
right. In fact, I feel like many people would like them to be more radical.
Yeah. This, it brings a few things to mind. First and foremost, I'm going to say it. I'm very boring on this subject. The press needs to stand up to Grandpa Trump a little bit. I want them to do it a lot, but they have to do it some. And this is what happens. This is why. They should have done this better during all of his campaigns, especially that first abhorrent campaign that we were all apparently unready for, to our eternal shame. But all they have to do is stand up to him a little bit. She wasn't rude. She wasn't pushy. She just kept saying, well, where's the evidence? And he would say, when you look, and he does that thing, and everybody goes and they look. It's just like dogs, like you pretend to throw a ball, and then they look, and then they don't question anything, and then they just move on. I asked the question, he answered it. That's journalism. No, it's not. It's not enough. All you have to do is demand an answer. And when he starts waving his arms and juggling and lighting things on fire and swearing at you and calling you a dumb bitch and all these things that he does, so everybody goes, oh my God, and they forget about the question. This interviewer sat there and said, where's the evidence? And he would say, blah, 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 hamana, hamana, hamana. And she'd say, okay, but that's not evidence. And it started to throw him because in the Oval Office, people, they just listen. All those press gaggles that they have, they just swallow it. Okay, I'll write it down and tell them what you said. That's my job. That's accountability. I said it. You said it. He said it. And I wrote it down, and I'm just a mouthpiece now at this point. They don't demand answers. They take lies right to the face. They don't, and maybe maybe there's a reason that's how it works. I don't get it. But when nobody challenges him, he has become so soft now that he bruises so easily that all you have to do is go, okay, but that's not an answer. And she did it 3 or 4 times in a row. Okay, but that's not evidence. Okay, but where's the evidence? You say this, you should have, if it's so out of control a problem, you should have evidence left, right, and center. All she did was say, where's the beef? Over and over again, a couple of times. And he flipped out. He hasn't been challenged. He has been so unchallenged for so long and so profoundly that now that someone has just said, I'm not taking this bizarre, ventriloquist act with no puppet. I'm not buying it. Where's the evidence? At least say one thing. You're so sure this is your thing. And he can't take it. I've been begging for people to do this. So bravo to Kirsten Welker. I hope I've got her name right. For doing what her entire profession should have been doing all along in the most light-handed, milquetoast, but insistent and polite way. And no one has done it to my satisfaction. This is but a start. And you can see how vulnerable he is to that. And so bravo to her.
Fair point.
And I don't know, that's the first thing. I can't even remember the second thing I wanted to get off my chest, but it's just so important. And it would, I think it would have done this country a great service if our media hadn't folded in this second term so willingly.
Or in the first. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. And if the second one comes to mind, then we'll get it back in. But let's move on for now and look at a governor's race. In this case, what's happening with the Colorado governor's race? Here's Colorado, and actually these are the results from the 2022 gubernatorial election, where Governor Polis won. You can see the dark areas, the dark blue areas if you have a color internet. And the population base for
My day,
Colorado.
the internet was black and white.
Yes, exactly. My hamster stopped running. I don't got color. But here it is, and you can see sort of where the population is as well in the state. Um, but so,
So
Hannah, you're from out there. You're from out in Colorado. Tell us what's happening here. What's going on?
I am from Colorado. So my home is that light blue part in the top in the center, the very top in the center. That's where I'm from. And so what you need to know about Colorado is in that middle part, straight through the middle, there's a bunch of mountains. Um, and so as the sort of colonizers expanded westward, many of them just stopped at the mountains and they're like, nah, that's good enough. So you have to realize that that little strip in the middle is where like almost all the population is. Um, to the far, so the far west and the far east is mostly farmland. And so while you see quite a bit of red and orange in here, the numbers are a lot smaller than the little tiny blue pieces. I actually believe that awkward little blue piece in the middle might be Denver. Um, so, um, the governor's race on the progressive side is fairly standard, but on the Republican side, it's gotten a little bit wild. So, Colorado has always been a very sort of free thinking state. We were the first state to legalize abortion, the first state to legalize marijuana. Um, we briefly legalized gay marriage. But so and one of the sort of like sort of core themes in those legalizations is there's a progressive side and then there's a conservative side, and the conservative side is very, we don't want you in our business. So of the three conservative people, the sort of moderate in the room is a woman named Kirkmeyer, and she was a state representative. She represents that sort of area, I think, that's sort of moderately orange down, like sort of right of center, um as she is herself politically. And she is mostly unexciting, except for that a dozen years ago she tried to round up a bunch of people to secede from the nation. Or not secede from the nation, sorry, secede from the state. They called it the 51st State Initiative. And a lot of people voted for it initially, and then it failed terribly. And part of it is that it was going to be all this sort of maybe like the top third, which you see as mostly red, but that does include the light blue part where I'm from, which is highly progressive, or I guess here moderately progressive, but it's pretty progressive. And so they were not going to secede from the state. So, but that's pretty calm. So going from her, there's two other people. There's Bottoms and there's Marks. And they're both very conservative. So, and they also both are quite religious. Bottoms runs a it's, people have called it a church. I think it's actually some form of religious nonprofit, which I guess a church technically is. But he worked for Focus on the Family. If you're familiar with them, James Dobson is a very conservative organization in Colorado Springs. Unsurprisingly, all of these people kind of are around Colorado Springs, which is sort of the most populous conservative part of the state. And Bottoms is famously very friends with a guy named Altman, who is an anti-Semite. He has called the governor, who's Jewish, and another Jewish leader, like the like cult of satanic Jews or something. He said that liberals are kidnapping children. He's even reported it to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and I only saw this at another Bureau of Investigation, so not the FBI, but somewhere else. He's from, spent some time in Texas, so maybe it was that. But with no evidence, he's saying that that Democrats are kidnapping children. And because he's friends with this anti-Semitic guy who's trying to get the governor thrown in prison, which is very lock her up energy, except I guess it's lock him up in this sense. when asked if this anti-Semitic person who he's close to would have any like job in his administration if he were to win, he said, assuming it's not around Jewish people, probably, which is a terrible answer. Um, and then to go even more bizarre from bottoms, you have Marx, who calls himself a high-risk humanitarian. He claims to have saved tens of thousands of people in several different war-torn countries, as well as from cartels in Mexico. Um, when asked how many people he'd saved, he responded, "Not enough." Um, when asked if there was any proof that he had done any of these things, including saying like he called in a military airstrike, even though I think he's never been in the military, and was some of the first people, one of the first Americans in several war-torn areas that where America has, been engaged in police or combat operations. When asked if there was any proof of that, he referred to his dog, who he brought with him to the debate, and was basically said, like, "Are you calling my dog a liar? She was there with me." Um, but another thing worth noting is he said that his stepfather was abusive and encouraged him or sort of forced him to murder somebody when he was 7 years old in self-defense. Though it wasn't his sort of recall of the event isn't really in self-defense. The guy was, first of all, there's no evidence of any of this. Several people have asked if there's missing person reports or anything about that. None of that has ever come up. But he said basically his stepdad like beat him up and then forced him to do this, beat the victim up and then forced him to do this. He's also a 7th degree black belt in a martial arts that was invented by his father, his biological father, which I feel like means nothing. And those three people are running to run Colorado, and it's probably going to go to a Democrat, so it probably won't matter. But it's good to know that they're out there running. So,
Boy, let's hope it goes to a Democrat. I mean, that is just, these are the sort of people who are so beyond the pale, and yet this is who's being offered by the Republicans. And that's, when there are 2 to 4 people on the final ballot on the general election, anything can happen. All that matters is who comes out on that specific day to vote in Colorado, and you could wind up electing the dog whisperer or whatever he calls himself, or the guy who wants to make certain his friends don't work with Jews. Amazing.
yeah. Or the moderate who tried to secede from the state.
Right. The moderate, so-called moderate, who's trying to leave the state. Wow. Well, that is as moderate as they get, I guess, nowadays.
Yeah.
So they'll be on the national ticket before you know it. Tom, anything on this before we...
What is in the water in Colorado? Are you kidding me?
It should be noted that Colorado supplies water to 11 other states. It's one of the largest water suppliers in the country.
Making it all the more important to ask these questions and answer them.
Yes.
I don't know. It's just a mixed bag of nuts.
There you go. Wow. Well, we are going to have to keep our eyes. And now, when is the primary?
It is the end of this month.
Gotcha. So stay tuned. We'll have more on, at least on the election, and we'll be able to tell you more about what listen, the folks in Kentucky did some really wild things recently, the voters there. So stay tuned. We'll let you know what they do in Colorado. Hopefully won't be that surprised. Moving on, we are going from the calmness that is Colorado to Ukraine and Keep my name out of your mouth. Getting an update on what's going on with the Ukraine war and Russia's aggression towards it. There was an open letter sent by Zelensky to Putin talking about a meeting, trying to figure out how to get a peace plan in place. And they've been working on this for a while now. the White House in D.C. has been actively involved in bringing peace like they have in so many different parts of the world, and all of which are very much at war. And this is just another example of the great peace that they make that's made out of Washington D.C. nowadays. And there was and in fact, Zelensky mentioned the person who he had passed the letter on through was one of the U.S. negotiators, who was the person who passed it on to Putin. So Washington is still actively involved and is failing. Drones have been a big part of the war for the entirety of the war. Actually, Ukraine has been using them very effectively, and Russia's used them as well. And the Europeans are starting to say, "Hey, this is." It's caught the Europeans' attention, but now it's specifically gotten them upset because the drones have been starting. The Russian drones have been starting to explore outside of the Ukraine. That into Scandinavia, the Finnish and the Swedish, I believe, have both mentioned incidents, and the Europeans as well. So we are going to have to keep an eye on what's going on with the drones. And Latvia was another place that had reported shooting down a drone, which is good news, that crossed their border. And there was successful interception of a Russian electronic warfare spilling over. So there's a lot going on. What else do we know about Kyiv and Ukraine and what's going on over there?
Well, I mean, we had that Zelensky challenged Putin to a ceasefire and prisoner exchange, and Putin said no. He's going to stick it out, apparently.
And
and
the
then,
leaders,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the leaders of Europe, not just the folks that we just talked about, but Starmer specifically, Starmer and Macron and Metz. So that's you got Ukraine, France, and Germany all jumping to see what they can do about setting out a 5 principles of peace for a peace plan and moving forward with that.
Yeah, absolutely. They had the 5 points. Basically, they're calling for Putin to agree to an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. They said the current front line should serve as the basis for negotiations, stressing that international borders can't be changed by force and that Ukraine's sovereign right to choose its security agreements and alliances must be respected. They said that Ukraine must receive robust and legally binding security guarantees once a ceasefire takes effect. They build on commitments agreed in Berlin on December 25 and Paris in January 26, include the deployment of a multinational force in Ukraine. That'd be big. Russian assets frozen by Western countries would remain immobilized until Moscow ends its aggression and compensates Ukraine for war damages. And fifth, leaders said European security interests must be protected in any agreement, and that decisions affecting EU and NATO would require the consent of member states and allies. So, Europe shoving their foot in the door pretty big on this one. Good for them.
Right.
I wish we were as stalwart here in this country.
True. And then there was also a thing about the UK and France and Canada and Australia and Norway and New Zealand, another collection of 5. That's basically the Commonwealth nations, I guess, places that are formerly, other than France, places that have been had ties with England, and they impose sanctions for illegal settlements in a different conflict. We'll get to that in just a minute. But it looks like Europe's being active in trying to resolve issues as opposed to the U.S., which talks a lot about ceasefires and great peace plans and moving forward with making peace everywhere in the world, which is clearly not happening. It's hard to keep track, actually. Are we currently helping to support the Russian position or the Ukrainian position?
Right. Well, we both know who the commander in chief is supporting, and that does make it hard to support Ukraine.
Makes it even better. Sure. Okay, so we'll move on from Ukraine to another conflict, and that's the Middle East, and with Israel and Iran and the what's been going on, continuing to go on, and the war that we have won. I think we won, and then we stopped it, and then we didn't stop it, and then we did stop it, but it was going to stop in 2 weeks, and then
With a ceasefire with moderate fighting, something like that.
ceasefire. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Wonderful, and that's what and so the ceasefire thing that I was mentioning, or the sanctions that I was mentioning by those 5, 6 nations, has settled on the settlers. So part of the issues that have been ongoing, one of the issues is the Israeli ultra Orthodox have decided to settle in the West Bank and start communities there while negotiations were going on as to possibly in at some point trading land for peace. And so the ultra orthodox are saying, well, but there's not been an agreement yet, so we're going to start building neighborhoods and trying to expand where we live. So all of a sudden now that becomes territory that we have to have because it's our homes. And at the same time, people on the other side have said, well, no, all that means is that you're causing more of a problem because you're settling in places that are not places for you to set, are not legal for you to settle in. And by doing it, you're just provoking a continuation of conflict. And so these 6 nations have decided that they're going to actually start enforcing some kind of sanctions against these settlements. And that will be something that, a lot has been going on about sanctions and what would work, and if economic pressure would be something that would be, will that be something there's a response to? Is that something that will somehow help? In some parts of the world, it has helped. Putting financial sanctions in place has certainly been gotten responses from other situations, like what happened in South Africa, what happened in Russia. So there's been a lot behind it to say that it's something that will be effective. We'll see whether or not this one works, but it is a move towards trying to find an answer as opposed to just continuing to sell bombs and letting it happen. All six, all foreign ministers from all 6 of those countries announced the move just Tuesday. However, Australia and New Zealand sanctioned many of those now sanctioned by other states last week. So they're joining in. And all 6 have recognized the state of Palestine and and claimed that the sanctions will help to preserve the validity of the two-state solution, which is probably something that needs to be talked about again. Uh, so there's a lot. Two-state solution is really, I don't know what's happening with that. I don't know if it's viable. I don't know if it's still, it still seems to be the footprint that we're all talking about as far as what will promote or bring peace. So what do you think about the two-state solution?
Uh, I feel complicated ways about it that I don't know if I can go into in the next 4 or 5 minutes. Um, this is maybe bleeding over into a little bit, but with the current conflict expanding into Lebanon, there's been push from some high up Israeli officials to sort of colonize southern Lebanon as well. To sort of push Hezbollah out and claim it as Israeli territory. And I feel like that's not the correct solution. And I hate that I get in this position of people being like, oh, does that mean like you support Hezbollah? Which no. But I feel like it's going to end up just being a moving of the goalposts again. Like, oh, we'll take over this thing and then this thing and then whatever. um yeah. And I also think that as you mentioned sanctions, which I do think are a good idea, but I do also want to note that as we especially we in the US, as we start to get into these conflicts that cause more fracturing within the world, and we'd alluded to this the other day, like there's, with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, there's a lot of sort of people that we have uneasy relationships with, Russia, China, etc., who are finding alternative ways to get their gas. And it won't be too long before enough of them can start to reach out and build this coalition outside of the US, at which point our sanctions will be much less effective. We're basically kind of alienating our sort of self-interest at all costs is actually like reducing our power. So I feel concerned about that, and that we should, one way we could do better is to work with some of these organizations or work with the EU to deal with whatever's happening with drones or whatever. Basically, we're going to need these sort of multi-state or what am I thinking, like multinational organizations to move forward.
Right, multi international coalitions. Which is is it now you had mentioned something about Israel attempting to colonize southern Lebanon. I I know that I've heard over decades of times that Israel will attack Hezbollah and try to scare them out of southern Lebanon, or try to remove them from southern Lebanon. But I don't know that I've ever heard of them saying that then they want to try to annex any part of it. They're just trying to get Hezbollah out because Hezbollah keeps pushing out the Lebanese army in order to be able to use military force from southern Lebanon to reach into Israel.
Well, we're not to the geo quiz yet, but we will be there. But there's a river in the southern part of Lebanon. And Hezbollah is mostly, a lot of their control is stuff sort of south of the river. It doesn't cut across cleanly. It comes across and then sort of jags up, and then it doesn't actually go all the way to the border with Syria. But there's a Hezbollah is sort of in that below the river place. It's called the Thani River. And I guess recently an Israeli defense minister said that they need to control security all the way up into that river.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess in March.
Gotcha. Because that would be like the Golan Heights, where they went in and basically removed the Syrians, I think, out of there, and then just haven't left.
Exactly. It's exactly like that, actually. Yeah.
Gotcha. Whew. Okay. Now, was he speaking on behalf of the government, or was he just saying, as a minister, this is what I want to see?
Let me pull up this BBC thing.
While you're doing that, why don't we shift over to the Geo Quiz?
Cool.
And Tom, if we can look at, there we go, the Geo Quiz, looking at the world and you. And maybe we can pull up the Ukraine one first. And just so folks can see what we're talking about as far as a Geo Quiz, we mean that we were going to look at where these places are that we've been talking about. Sometimes folks think that way. They want to have a visual. They want to be able to see what you're talking about. So right now, the bottom left hand, or as I'm looking at it, my left hand, you'll see that there's sort of the darkness and all the lights on in that part of Eastern Europe and Ukraine. That's because that's what's going on now. It's nighttime over there. So the lights are on, and you see Ukraine in the middle. In the upper right, you see more larger picture, zooming out, so to speak, so that you can see that Ukraine's positioned. You got Eastern Europe towards the front to the bottom, and you can see Russia and Belarus and those sort of other former Soviet satellite nations to their above them and to their east. Let's go to do we and now I believe we also have an Israel, Lebanon, Iran picture. Here we go. So what we're talking about right now, and what Hannah's looking up as we speak about. So you see those two blue dots over by the Mediterranean. So by the sea, you got Beirut. This particular map did not list Israel, but you see it's between Alexandria and Amman, which is in Jordan. That blue dot there's where Israel is. The blue dot just above it is Lebanon, where Beirut is listed. And then to the east, you'll see that huge chunk of land that is Iran. And the above picture is just once again a draw out so you can see what part of the globe we're talking about. The northeast corner of Africa. The peninsula that's sort of in the middle there is Saudi Arabia and where Yemen is, and the UAE and a few others nations. But you can see uh, that where the bright part of the light is just by the Mediterranean, that's that sort of just by Cairo, which is what you see listed on the bottom slide. So I can give you a perspective of what we're talking about. Have you found that article?
Yeah, so basically, um, Katz, who's the defense minister, met with the chiefs and said that they have to create a defensive space to keep the threat away. And he said that the IDF was now maneuvering into Lebanese territory to seize a front line of defense, eliminating Hezbollah terrorists and destroying the infrastructures. He said that many thousands of Lebanese people in the south who have been displaced will not return until security is guaranteed for the residents of the north. For the north of Israel, sorry. And Lebanon has if you were aware or know about the sort of Lebanese civil war a few decades ago, there's a lot of sects fighting for space in around there. But the idea of the military coming and controlling all of it until it's safely safe, first of all, feels a little bit. I won't say for sure, but there is definitely a lot of space for looseness in that definition as a place that's been having a lot of, like I said, a recent civil war and a lot of strife, since. And so I feel like saying, hey, like this, area, it's just going to be there till it's safe. Like that could be forever. And as you said, Matt, sometimes there's been residents who've moved into these spaces and then claim it as their space. So I feel like there is a lot of fairness it is very fair to be cautious about this behavior.
And I understand that the Israelis, who usually leave the Christian neighborhoods alone and just target Hezbollah and Muslims, that they started leafleting the Christian sections as well in Lebanon, saying this would be a good time to go away, leave your homes, because we're going to start action, and you're going to have to, it would be safer for you. Your home might be gone, but it will be safer for you if you leave.
Well, there's also been. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you done? Am I cutting you off?
No, go right ahead.
There's also been, since the sort of fall of the Baathists in Syria, there's also been pushing of Israel into sort of Western Syria as well. And so I feel like there is significant history to be concerned that this is not going to be a temporary measure.
right. Well, let's move on to one of the other slides, if we can. Make it to let's go to Toledo because we talked about that earlier. There we go. Thank you very much. We talked about the shooting at the festival in Toledo. Toledo's up there. You can see just at the end of Lake Erie and under, just you could say under Detroit, and the rest of Ohio is under it. Cleveland to the direct east, Columbus, which is the capital down there, to the south, and then the draw out where you can see all of North America and still see the dot that shows you Toledo. And Colorado, we also talked about the gubernatorial election out there. So let's see if we can pull up the Colorado picture there. That does that look like home? Does that remind you? You see the middle and the western part of the U.S. on top, and then is there a dot on there? Actually, the dot was not added on that. But if you look at the bottom part, you'll see that Colorado, all these some of the other western, say Utah next door, New Mexico just below. You mentioned Colorado Springs in particular, and there it is on the map, and Denver, which was the one of the larger population centers, and one of those
Yes.
blue,
So
that
the
weird little.
the
Go ahead.
county just so Denver County, and then the county sort of south of that. Wow, the name of which just flew out of my head is like sort of the second most populous area, and then you can't see it in this map, but just sort of, and it's like sort of the um, population. How to describe it? There's a lot of conservative places, like I said, sort of on the far east and the far west, but Colorado Springs is both highly conservative and highly populous. It's the second that county that it's in is the second highest population county. Actually, I think it's the highest population county because Denver metro area is a different county than Denver city itself. And as you can see, Denver and Colorado Springs and even Cheyenne, which is much less populous, but is, the capital of Wyoming, they're all on that line right as the Rocky Mountains start. That's where a lot of the population is in Colorado.
All right. And Tom, if we can also get to the other location, we have not spoken about it yet, but trust me, you'll be hearing about it very shortly, and it'll be worth the wait. New York. There's all of North America, and you'll see that blue dot there on the what's the northeast of the United States, and then the close up below, you'll see right down there. It looks like the dots in Brooklyn for some reason, and
That's where I am. I'm the
there we
important person in this story.
exactly. It's all about Hannah, and so you're the blue dot, and you can see much more of a close up. New York, of course, being on an island, and so is Manhattan. Uh, there's a couple other islands involved: Long Island, Staten Island, and the reason it's coming up is because it's mentioned in our next segment. So we'll go to the final issue of tonight, and that is, of course, the Trump dump. This Trump dump is brought to you by the Bigly Loser. The Bigly Loser. What happens when he goes to a game? So one of the issues, of course, is Donald Trump attended a historic return to the finals by the Knicks, first time in 27 years, and of course, New York was greatly abuzz, was greatly concerned, greatly focused on it. There were huge screens that were placed in several parks so that people who couldn't get into the game could go to their local park and watch the game. I mean, and that happened in a half dozen different places. And of course, then people had their own. Is that a shirt? Is that a Do we have a celebrating shirt here?
My roommate made this "Let's Go Knicks" shirt because they're actually playing right now as we speak.
There we go. We got the "Let's Go Nick" shirt. We got so to say the least, people are people are responding to the Knicks being in the finals for the first time in a long time, and Donald Trump decided, being that he is, I don't know, he's a Knicks fan when they're winning at least. So as they're doing something historic, he is now a Knicks fan who came back up to New York, having run away from New York, just like he ran away from that interview. He ran away and moved to Mar-a-Lago, but he came back for this. And the welcome is just about what you would expect New Yorkers to give Donald Trump as a welcome. The boos were everywhere, and the coverage of it not only showed it happening at the game where there were some boos, but went out to some of the more to the local parks like Bryant Park, which is in southern Manhattan, and the wave of booing in the middle of the national anthem when everybody's singing. Their hands are on their hearts and they're all singing along. Everyone's in unison. Everyone is getting into the national anthem, and the camera landed on Donald Trump, and the crowd responded with a wave of boos. Now, of course, he said later that it was mostly cheers, which, of course, surprise, surprise, there's another lie. As you can watch the video for yourself and see, most certainly not more cheering than boos. What else is happening in Trump news? Well, the the $100,000 H-1Bs for particular immigrants. If you pay $100,000, you can get that particular type of immigration status. The courts decided that's not the case. That's unlawful. So he's not gonna be able to get away with that. Tom, you were saying earlier that you wanted to see people responding, and there are starting to be cracks in that armor. There are people who are starting to push back. The other branches of government are finally sort of getting into gear, only 12 years too late, or what is it, 8 years too late? But
Way,
they are
way
doing it
too late.
way too late, but they are doing it, and this is another example. Tell you what, let's open it up to those two before we get to anything else, and see what you have to say. What do you think about the Knicks games, and what do you think about the H-1Bs?
Well, we're currently losing again, so that's not great. Um, but yeah, as Matt said, like some of these watch parties were actually because there had been giant watch parties outside of the stadium, but the city shut them down because of presidential security or whatever. And they might have done it no matter who showed up, who was the president. But yeah, there's definitely like additional animosity because it's Trump. He also fell asleep during the game, which is terrible. Also, as a note for the booing, currently the lowest price to get into those is $4,500, and the medium price is $8,500. So these are wealthy people booing. So it's not just like people who should like him, but obviously this is New York, and we hated Trump before it was cool. As for the H-1B visas, the way that I will try and keep my thoughts on immigration here short. It is absurd. We should let more people immigrate in. We're a country of immigrants or enslaved people or natives. But immigration is huge to our history and our power and our, robustness and our Americanness. And I feel like it's absurd to charge that, especially because a lot of people who come here are coming in on student visas. So they're already probably spending $100,000. So, just let them stay with their student visa. I guess not on an H-1B. That's slightly different, but they're creating more than $100,000 worth in value of being here. So there's no reason to restrict restrict that.
Tom?
I hope all his plans come to naught. I hope it all just dissolves all around him. That's all I really have to add about those. Every time, what was the H-1B visa and what, the UFC thing? What else was there?
Well, there's also the Iran War Powers vote in the House. That
Yeah.
was a bit of a shocker, and that gets more good news. He wound up losing that vote. Although as you pointed out, Congress has repeatedly simply handed over their power to him. But this is perhaps another step in the right direction. And then, yeah, of
A
course,
small step. We voted on the Epstein Files Act at the end of last year, so let's not go popping champagne for the hairy-chested, two-fisted defense of the Constitution by our designated representatives. It's still the milkest of toasts.
There you go. Well put. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's actually stunning that it's been so long since the Epstein files were supposed to be released unredacted and to the public. But yeah, and then there is, and we'll speak about that in just a second. But we also want to mention the other thing, which was the UFC charade. I don't know what to call it, but apparently now there's some issue that it might be stopped by the courts. So the secondary music performance that America 250 was for the nation, but then he had to start a thing called Freedom 250, which was going to be his little show of, I don't know, being able to have some people perform and him being able to say he did it. I guess I don't know the exact background on it, but all those acts, once they found out that it was a personal, that it was for him instead of as part of the official celebration, they all started pulling out. And this UFC thing was supposed to be sort of the backup as well. I mean, it had its own life, but it was because he has money in their company, so he was bound to do it. And but the idea was when the music thing started failing, all of a sudden everybody shifted to saying, "Well, that's okay. We have this UFC fight set up and a ring being put out in front of the White House, and right next to all of the demolition from the east, what used to be the East Wing, and now the courts are saying that might be stopped as well." Which, yeah, 100%. There you go. Anything on that before we wrap up altogether?
I think it would be delicious if that UFC thing didn't come off after all of this setup.
Yeah, more failure the better.
That's what he brings. More failure all the time. And
he is quite skilled at failure, I will say. It's probably his biggest skill, but he could still use some more.
Exactly. We certainly don't want to get in the way of his continuing to fail. And is there? Oh, and Hannah, is there any update on the score of the game before we?
We're just back from halftime. It's not displaying on my TV, but I do know that the Spurs were up by the largest amount at halftime in finals in the NBA history.
Wow! Holy
so
smokes.
They are destroying the Knicks right now.
Wow!
I think it might still be halftime.
This is all the Trump gets involved with stuff and it just collapses. And the first time the Knicks get to the finals in 27 years, and he brought his little touch to it. And wow, holy smokes. Okay, so speaking of numbers and things that are related to Trump, I think it's time to have a check-in on the Epstein count-up. And that is the days since the unredacted Epstein list have not been released. We are at day 4012, and it will continue. Thanks for joining us at PolitiPod Live for Political Talk. You're welcome to join us every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here for PolitiPod Live. If you want political laughs, join us and a half dozen of our friends for our monthly political comedy podcast, PolitiPod. You'll find that at soundcloud.com/PolitiPod.
This is Tom Bickle.
This is Hannah Soldner. Let's go next.
And I'm Matt Nisanoff saying goodbye.